more of a visualization tool, and for some reasons, that is why quite a bit of people would, of course, they get more interested in Power BI. They want to go into it. They want to start doing stuff, which is quite interesting and very much reasonable. But eventually, some people get stuck on the way. So why do they get stuck? Because they begin to get some requirements that's just beyond visualization, that's just beyond dragging and dropping stuff. And at that point, it turns out for some people that they feel, okay, so there is need to learn beyond them having, just some very interesting visuals. So that is why for someone like me, I just feel that, okay, yeah, visualization is cool, but most people can do it. So why not go into what many people shy away from, like Sylvia mentioned. So DAX is something that many people, it's one of the areas that people don't really like about Power BI, most especially because it can get complex very easily. But I want to say that in the next 40 minutes or thereabout that we have of the session, we'll be having this sort of a crash course. So I'm calling it a crash course on DAX. It's going to be very much foundational, and we'll be touching on most of the fundamentals when it comes to working with DAX, upon which we can go on to now build our skill set, our prowess when it comes to writing DAX, depending on the scenario that we find ourselves. I've been introduced. I'm just going to go straight into this, but I'm hoping that we all can see the chart, because I would like to get a few feedback, probably by chatting. Some of us who would probably want to speak to some of my questions, you may want to use the raise hand icon so I can call on us to answer certain things. The first thing is this: my assumption, everybody on the call at some point or the other, we have used Power BI, or even if probably our learning of Power BI started with this extravaganza, most likely we have been doing certain things within Power BI itself, and we've heard about DAX. To us, what does DAX mean? Can somebody, let's type on the chat, what does it mean to us? Or we shout it out. DAX, DAX is an acronym for something. What is it? Sorry, my sessions, I ask quite a bit of questions, so please let's be prepared, so that it's a way to get feedback from us. So I'm sure that we're following, and I'm not just speaking to myself. Oh, all right. Thanks a lot for that. I know I'm late. Please, I beg you. I like that name. Interesting name there. DAX is data analysis expressions. All right. Thank you, Daniel. DAX is data analysis expressions. So when we talk about DAX, literally, so we're saying that DAX is data analysis expressions, and there are three results types. I will begin with this. There are three reasons why I would want to write DAX. So I want to make certain, I'll be cutting short certain things because we started quite a bit late, so that I can get to the point I want to get to. Whenever we are thinking of DAX in Power BI, let's think about three things. Three major things whenever you're thinking of DAX in Power BI. And the three major things are tables, columns, or measures. What do I mean? Whenever you find yourself in a situation, you are building a report in Power BI, you're working on a Power BI related project, and you remember, or it comes to you that you need a new table within the Power BI data model itself that is not coming from any source. What do I mean? You have already imported all your tables, or you have connected to all your tables as the case may be, but after connecting to all your tables, you still have a requirement to get a new table that you cannot get, or you're not going to connect to any source to bring that in, that you would need within your own report. Then you need to write DAX for it. That is number one. Number two, we already have all our tables within the Power BI data model, but for some reasons, there is a particular column that we need, and you feel that, okay, you want to add that column within the Power BI data model itself, then you will need DAX for it. And the last one is measures. What does it mean? Measures, see them as any result type for DAX that is not giving you a table or a column as an outcome. So this means that when you write measures, you are neither getting a table, physical table as an outcome, nor are you getting a physical column as an outcome. So it's something that sits within the Power BI data model, but you can only see the result of it when you get to add it to a visual. So I'm going to take that again. This is the very foundation, which is, think about DAX. When you need a new table in the sense that you are not connecting to a source to suck that table in, but you need that table within your Power BI data model, then you need to write DAX. So that is what is called a calculated table. When you need a new table, a new column on an existing table within your data model, of course, the table might have come from whatever source that you connected to, SQL Server, your analysis services, your Excel CSV, whatever source. But when you got into Power BI, you realize that you need an extra column that didn't come from the source. Then you need to write DAX. So that is a calculated column. Then measure was what I described earlier, which is a result type for DAX that is neither a table nor a column. So let's begin to get to this. When we talk about calculated tables generally, some of the tables, or one of the most important tables that you would need to get or to use within your Power BI data model, that probably for some reasons you may not have it, you may not be able to connect it from elsewhere, except depending on the organization. Some organization might have it, you may be able to, but one of the tables that people create mostly when it comes to using DAX to create tables is a date table. I won't be going too much in details into why you need a date table, but majorly one of the reasons why you need a date table is because it allows you to run your time intelligence calculations very well. What does time intelligence calculation mean? It means some calculation that depends on period, time-based period. For instance, when you want to have your revenue, for instance, sum of revenue, it gives you everything. But when you want to begin to now apply some sort of restriction to that revenue figure to say that I don't want the full revenue, I want revenue only for last day or for last month. When you want to begin to have some of those calculations, it is very much advisable that you have a date table for reasons that your date table will have very continuous dates. So let's see that very quickly. I don't want to have too much introduction into all of this. But as mentioned, let's quickly go into the chart. So we'll be having a revision at intervals. I said that there are 3 results types for DAX. What are they? Please let's put that on the chart for me. 3 result types for DAX. What are they? So whenever you are writing DAX, it will result into one of these 3. Let's quickly put on the chart, So now, what I expect that to draw. I have a data already loaded here. This is a sample data set, Power BI sample data set itself. The first thing we want to do is the second result type, which is the column. What is that result type? I already explained that it says when on our existing table, we see a reason to have an extra column on that same table. How do we get to that? So everybody, I want us to look at this data set. Look at this data set. I have a couple of columns there. I have the segment, I have the country, products, discount bound. I have units sold, unit production cost, unit selling price, discount, the sales amount, and the date. These are all the columns that I have on this data set. Look at this. Tell me, assuming that we have a requirement to have, let's say we want to have the profit. We want to know the profit per transaction. So every single row on this data set is a transaction. So somebody under the government segment in Germany, the product the person transacted in was Caratera, discount bound was none. The unit sold, the number of items the person bought was 1513. The production cost was 3, selling price was 350, discount was 0. This was the amount we made from that sales, and the transaction happened on the 1st of December, 2014. So every single row is a transaction. So now we want to know for every single transaction here, how much profit did we make per transaction? So let's look at this table. Tell me what potentially could give us the profit from all of this column that we have. We can speak to this. Let me know if you want to speak to this. so we can run through this very fast. What column or what combination of columns from what we have can potentially give us profit? Okay, Daniel says sales minus costs units. Sales minus costs units. So yes, cost unit. Okay, unit production cost. Okay, thanks for the try, Daniel. Anybody else? What do we think? Is that our final answer? Daniel, you may want to look at it again. Okay, so as not to take too much time. All right. When we say profit, remember that what we have here, this is the unit sold. This is the unit production costs, and this is the unit selling price. The sales amount here is the amount we got from the transaction as a whole, which most likely it is the combination of the unit sold and the unit selling price. So the product of the unit selling price and the unit sold was what gave us the sales amount. So potentially we may not want to say that the profit we got from this transaction was sales minus unit production cost, but we know that profit is sales selling price minus cost price. That is our profit. So when we deduct the cost price from the selling price, we get a profit that we made from that. So potentially what we want to do here is to say that the unit profit, since we have unit cost and we have unit selling price, we could say that unit profit will be our unit selling price minus the unit cost price. How do we get that out here? So we need an extra column that we want to call profit. So for us to get that extra column on this our data view, if we look at the tabs, right on the tabs, when we are here, we'll see that we have two extra tabs. These two extra tabs, they are called contextual tabs. What does contextual tab mean? It is a tab that exists or that appears only when certain events has happened. So now this is something that we would have observed in Excel, Word, PowerPoint, most of Microsoft tools that we have used, which is a case of, for instance, in Excel, when you add a chart in Excel, you're going to see two extra tabs come up at the top, maybe your design tab, maybe your format tab or something like that. Those tabs will go off immediately, the chart goes off, or you click out of that chart. So they are called contextual tab. So now, because we want to add new columns, so I can come here to column tools. Then I come here to new column. I see a button here for new column. It says write a DAX expression that creates a new column in the selected table and calculates values for each rows. So I'm going to click on that. Quite explanatory what I would do. So when I click on that, that opens up here. So now the column is blank, but the formula bar becomes active now. So DAX is now, the Power BI engine is expecting that I write an expression that the result will then be populated on this column. So I can come here now. I call this my price column, and the syntax for DAX, again, I'm going to use this to explain the syntax for DAX. The syntax, unlike Excel, when you're starting your calculation in Excel, what you need to do is just write equal to, then you write your function name and you supply whatever arguments the function is taking. So arguments, they are just like parameters that would feed into the function before the function runs. So the same thing happened in DAX. The difference is just that for DAX, we need to give our calculation a name. So you give your calculation a name, then you specify the function you're using and the other argument that will feed into the function. And another difference between this and Excel is that for Excel, you are going to be referencing cells, but in DAX, you are referencing tables or columns. So Power BI does not work with the concept of cells. It works with the concept of columns and tables. So now, first thing, we need to give a column a name. So I'm going to call this price. That is the name of this. Then we have said that to get our price, we need to subtract the unit production cost. I said price, profit. Profit, we need to subtract the unit production cost from the unit selling price. So I'm going to come here, I'll just say the unit selling price. And immediately I start typing, you see we have IntelliSense, which would allow us to quickly select what we are referring to. So I'm going to tab into that to select that. So I've selected this column, literally unit selling price. then our usual minus, and then I'm subtracting the unit production cost. So I'm going to just type unit production cost, and I'll tab to select that as well. This is all I'm doing. Pretty simple, pretty direct. And I'll hit enter on my keyboard. And immediately we're going to see that this column populates out with the answer. Let's quickly validate. So here we have 350 as the selling price. Production cost is 3. So the profit is 347. Excellent. So we are a way into it. This is an example of a calculated column, which is one of the result types that we get whenever we are writing DAX. So think of different scenarios like that. A couple of times you may want to, you want to run a calculation. There's a requirement that needs you to run a calculation, but some of the columns that we need to feed into that calculation, you don't currently have them. You need a combination of columns. An approach could be that you want to first come to that existing table that has those combination of columns, first come in there to write out, to create the columns that you need, then you go back to now feed that into your visual. That may be an approach. It has its own downside, but that's not a conversation for now. So this is a calculated column. That is the first result type. The second result type that we talk about in DAX is a new table. So you need a new table within your Power BI data model that you're going to use in your reporting. And I mentioned that one of the key tables that you'll be needing is a date table. So how do you create a date table? A date table is pretty much very direct to create. Most especially when you are not having some crazy requirements there within that date table itself. But at the basic level, it's pretty much direct to create. Let me also mention here that DAX is just like your Excel. It runs on functions, so it's a functional language, which means for most of the functions that probably you have in Excel, there's every tendency that those functions also are available in Power BI. There's every tendency, or something that would replace it would be in DAX as well. So which means for some of the things that we would want to do, we only may want to start to think around what function to use to achieve that. So when we want to create a new table in DAX, we want to create a date table in DAX. There are two functions to achieve that in DAX. There are two functions we can use majorly. So, but before then, the same way we need to come here to our data view. Once you're in the data view, at the top, you're going to see the table tools, and then you come here to new table. So you see new table, you can actually access new column from here as well. So I'll come here to new table. It says write a DAX expression to create a new table. So I'm going to select that. Once I select that, it opens up a blank table for me. And now it's asking me to write the first thing, which is giving my table a name. So what name do I want to give my table? So I'm going to call this a date table. That's the first thing. Then what function can I use to generate my date table? I mentioned that there are two options majorly. So we have the calendar function and we have the calendar auto function. The difference between the two, calendar function will require you to specify the start date and the end date. What does that mean? You need to specifically tell DAX where to start from and where to end. But for calendar auto function, it is a function that automatically within itself looks at your data model. It looks at what is the earliest date on your data model on all of the tables that you have on the model and what is the latest date. And it gives you a list of dates from the earliest year to the latest year. What does that mean? So if you have on your data model, if you have on your data model, you have a table that has columns from, you have a table that has dates from, let's say, 2021 to 2023. You have date from 2021 to 2023. What calendar auto function will do is that it will pick from 1st of January 2021 and then return all the dates up to the 31st of December 2023. That is what calendar auto will do. So it automatically looks at your model and returns all the dates in between for you. So now, let's use the calendar auto function, and then it does not require an argument. I'm going to talk about this argument very much shortly. So I'll just close the brackets, and then I'll hit enter. So once I hit enter here, I get out a table with a single column. So I get out a table with a single column, which is called a date column. And then it gives me a list of date from the 1st of January 2023, which means the earliest date that I have on this data model is 2023. And if I scroll, look at all the items here, most likely we'll see that we have up to December 31st of December 2014. So that is how calendar auto function works. So this is a table on its own. How is this a table? If I come here to my data model, immediately I see that I have an extra table, which is called the date table, and I have the date column. So I can now begin to add extra columns to these. I can begin to add extra columns to these to say that maybe I need, I want to extract the year from this, I want to extract the month, I want to extract all of those other things. I can do those from here. So maybe for the case of this conversation, let me just add 1 or 2 columns. So I'm going to add the year column. So I want to extract year from this date. So I'll say year. That is the name of the column. Remember, for whatever you're doing in DAX, you need to give your calculation a name. That's the first thing before the equal to sign, before you specify how you want that to run. So I have the year from the year column equal to, we have a year function in DAX, which I can use. The year function is requesting for only a single thing. What is the date? And this is the argument. So depending on the kind of function that you are using in DAX, there would be some argument that needs to be fed into that function. There will be some argument that needs to be fed into that function. Some function will need more than one argument, while some function requires only one. Here is a function that requires only one. If I go to a function like, say, format, you see that format requires 3 arguments. It wants a value, the format, how do you want to format it, and locale name. So these are 3 arguments. But when you look at these 3 arguments, the last one is in a square bracket. Any argument that you see within a square bracket means that that argument is optional. And that implies that this calculation can run without this third argument. So if I supply the value and the format and I close my bracket, I hit enter, this calculation or this function will run and it will return any errors. And that was the case of the calendar auto function. So if I go back to calendar auto, you see that the only argument it has is in a square bracket, fiscal year and month. And so because this is in a square bracket, it implies that this is optional. And that's why we were able to run the calculation even while we omitted the function, this argument. So I'm going to come back to the year function. So I'm going to type the year and then what is the date. So I'll call on the date from this table. And now that I typed date, one of the things you need to bear in mind is this. The date that I see at the moment, it has FX behind it. Any suggestion that has FX behind it means that that is a function. That is not what you typically want to use. Then you get to see some other options. So this one that has like a table behind it, that is a table. This one that has, it's not fully a table because it has some gray side to the left. That is a column on the table. So we see that we have the date column on the date table. That is what we need. Then I'm going to close my bracket. I will hit enter on this. And then this rolls up, gives us the year. So 2013, that is the year from extracted from all of our dates. So here we expect to have 2 years, 2013 and 2014 across board. This is the second results type we can get in DAX. So we can go on to add more columns to our table as the case may be, as our requirement implies. So that is the second results type that we can get. When we go back to our result type, we have talked about the tables, we have talked about the columns, then we want to talk about measures. Like I mentioned in the introduction, measures are DAX calculations that you would not see the result immediately. Immediately we hit enter on our keyboard for the table, we got this result. When we calculated our profit, Just as we hit enter on our keyboard, we got it. So we saw the result immediately. That is not the same with measures. When you're creating a measure, the result is stored on the Power BI data model, but you only see the result of that when you begin to use that within your visual. So what are measures again? So I'll come here now. There are two kinds of measures within DAX. We have the implicit measures and we have the explicit measures. What does implicit measure mean? Implicit measures, they are the measures that run inherently within your Power BI engine. What does it mean? There are certain calculations that Power BI does for you by default. Those are implied calculations. For instance, now, if I come on this table and then I come here to my data pane here, and I select this sales column, or I select the profit column that we created. So if I select this profit column, you see now that I have this value, 15,366. What did the Power BI engine do to arrive at this 15,366? This is what it did. I selected the column, it came onto the values field, and then it did a sum of the entire column. So it did a sum of every single value that we have in that column. This is an implied calculation. So because Power BI engine is thinking that you don't want to return every single value on that table. You want the values rolled up, and then it rolled the values up, give us the total. That is an implied calculation. So which means this number that I have here, I can now begin to break it down. Let's say I want to see this by country. So I put some country on the rows, and now it tells us how much profit did we realize from each of the countries. So in Canada, we made 3,430. In France, we made this. This is an implied calculation. So whenever you are picking a column that has a potential to be aggregated, you are picking that column, you are dropping it on your visual, and you realize that the visual, the column gets rolled up, the column gets aggregated. What should come to your mind is that that is an implied calculation. That is an implied measure coming into play. The second kind of measure is the explicit measure. What does this mean? It implies the measures that you are expressly telling Power BI how to go about that calculation. So you are telling Power BI itself that I want you to run this calculation this way. Don't go and make guesses. Why is that an expressed or explicit calculation? It is because of the fact that if you look at this implied calculation, our implicit measure now, it is possible that the calculation we want is not a sum of our profit. Maybe we want average of our profit, or maybe we want the max of our profit, or we want the mean of our profit. But Power BI just guessed and said that, oh, maybe I'm giving you sum. And that is what the engine would always do by default. This is because this is implied. So now we may want to tell Power BI that we don't want sum. We want you to do average. Of course, you can actually manually edit this. Come here to change the calculation to whatever you want to change it to, but this calculation will still be run by the engine itself. So now, if you want to now expressly tell Power BI how to run the calculation, then you need to do it with an explicit measure or an explicit calculation. So when we talk about explicit calculation, I'm trying to catch up with the time. I see we have maybe about 15 minutes to round up. When we talk about explicit calculations or explicit measures, there are three kinds. We have the anchor, we have the filter, and we have the variances. So anchor measures, see them as the drivers for your calculations. What will drive most of your other calculation? Most of your other calculation will rely on them. Those are the anchors. So when they say that somebody is the anchor of a program, it means the person is the driver of that program, and the person is the one that directs the way the event or the program would go. The same thing is here. So we have some anchor measures, which are some very foundational measures. They are the ones that will drive most of your other calculations. So I'll talk about filter and variances shortly. So when we go to the anchor measures, here we have mostly our aggregators, the sum, the average, the max, the mean, the count, the distinct count, all of those are anchor measures. So if you want to add a measure, into your Power BI model, the same way that we had a new column and a new table. For you to add a measure, you have a couple of options. So a way is that you can stay on the home tab like this, and then you see here, new measure. That is a way. But the most advisable way, so that you have things quite well organized, is that you come to the specific table, because your measure would be sitting right within a table itself. So you come to the actual table that you want the measure to sit within, go to that table, do a right click on that table, and then you see the option for new measure. So when I click new measure from here, this would open up the formula bar for us. So now we have the formula bar up. Again, the syntax remains. We need to give our calculation a name. So let's say that for this one, we want to get the, let's say we want to get the maximum profit. So I'll say maximum profit. That's what we want to get. Then for our maximum profit, I want to use a function to get that. Remember, the name of the calculation equal to the function that will do that. And if you're coming from an Excel background, the function that will give you maximum in Excel is the max function. That is the same here. So I'm going to say max. And then the max function is asking for just a single thing. What is the column? So the column for this is, we want to pick the profit column, which is sitting on the financial stables, financial stable. So I'll pick that, close my bracket, I'll hit enter. So once I hit enter on this, see it says working on it, that's fine. When this is done, nothing happens. It's as though nothing happened. Why? Because we said that for our measures, we would not see the result until we add it to a visual. So I'm gonna come here now and I'll pick my maximum profit. So this is it. If I check the box, it gets selected, and now we see it on the visual. So that is how measures work. You will see the result until you add it to a visual. And then so we can now go on to break this down again. So maybe by country, I want to say the maximum by country, pretty much it seemed like we had the same maximum across all our countries. That is very much possible. So because of the kind of data that we have. So this is an explicit measure, an anchor. So now it's the same way. If you want to calculate the average, the mean, discount, and all of these, they are the same way. Remember the syntax, you need to give your calculation a name. Then you need to use the equal to sign. Then you need to call the function that will do that thing for you. So if you're calculating the distinct count, you need to use the distinct count function. If you're calculating the average, and again, your distinct count means that it's counting without repetition. It's not counting repeated values. It's only picking unique count. That's what it's doing. While your count will repeat values, will count whatever is repeated. So if you're doing an average, you use the average function, and like that, then you need to supply what column is the value that you want to get the average for, where is it coming from. So that is the anchor. When we talk about filters, filters are just your calculations. They rely on the anchors, but as the name implies, one begin to now restrict the result to certain things. That is what filters are. You want to begin to restrict the result of that calculation to certain things. Let's assume this scenario. So I'm going to come back here. So let's say that we have our maximum profit, for instance, now. So let me just replicate as a visual here. So I'm going to pick this for country. I'm going to do maximum profit. We have this now. This maximum profit, if you think about it, on this data set, we have 2 years of data, 2013, 2014. What this is doing is that it's calculated the maximum for Canada in both years. So assuming that we have a requirement to say that we want to know the maximum profit for 2013. We don't want it to be rolled up for both years. So we want to know what was the maximum profit for 2013, what was the maximum profit for 2014, for instance. That is a calculation that has some filters. So it is grouped under the filter-based calculations. And whenever you have a requirement that somehow needs you to begin to apply some restrictions on the way the calculation would normally run, you will need a powerful function in DAX that is called calculate. So I'm very sure for some of us that probably at some point we have used DAX before, no matter how foundational, we would be hearing of the calculate function. Think of the calculate function as that go-to guy whenever you have something to do with DAX and you need to tweak the way things would normally run. So now we know that if we run our maximum function, this is what it will return. It will return maximum profit for both years. So when we now want to restrict the results to a year or a particular period, then your max function alone will not be able to do that. We need to now bring in something else, which is the which is your calculate function. So let's see how that works. So remember what we want to get. What was the maximum profit for 2013 for all of these countries? So I'm going to come back again to my table where I want the measure to sit on. I'll do a right click, new measure. So I'll come here for that. Then here I'm going to say 2013 max profits. So I'm pretty poor with naming. So now, if I do max of my profit column, this will not work. This won't work because it will return the same value as the. But I need to somehow infuse this filter, which is the filter for 2013. I need to somehow infuse it in the calculation. And that is why I need to now begin with the calculate function. So the calculate function says that this evaluates an expression in a context modified by filter. So there are filters we want to apply on our normal calculation. So what is the expression? The expression is still the maximum profit that we want to calculate. So I'm going to say maximum, then the profit column on the financials table. That is the same thing we want to calculate. But what is the filter? So the filter is now that, remember that we said we want to calculate the profit for 2013. And we already have a date table. We have a date table that we have the year column on that date table. So we can now somehow tell DAX to apply filters on the year column. Yeah, on the year column. So this is the year column on our date table, where the year column is equal to 2013. So that's what we're doing. Calculate the maximum profit for where the year is equal to 2013. So I'll hit enter on this. I know there will be a potential issue, but that will be a learning point for us here as well. So I have this. Let me pick that measure now. This is the measure, 2013 max profit. I'm going to drop it on my visual. So now I have it on our visual, but it's returning the same values. These values are not correct. They may be correct actually, but they are not correct contextually. What do I mean? The problem that we have here, let me do the same thing. Let me do it with, let me see if I'm bringing this here. Let me see for, let me see. So this is the product. And then let's say this one. Okay, the profit is this. Okay, let me pick the maximum profit. So it's returning the same thing. But it's wrong in the sense that I want to show us why it's actually wrong before I go on with this calculation. So let me do the sum. Let me add the sum to this guy here. So I'm going to take out, I think I can do it here. So I'm going to take out this one for now. Let me add the sales here. So this is the sales amount. So now let me go on to repeat the same calculation, but we want to push it down to 2013. And let's see what the result would be. So now I will say 2013 sales. This is calculate the sum of the sales, but shift the year down to 2013. So let's see what it gives us. So I'm putting this here, and this is giving us the same value. The reason why this is giving us the same, I know that we probably are already with me on the fact that if the sum of sales column, the first one, if it's returning this value, we expect that the second column should be lesser. Why should it be lesser? Because we have 2 years of data on the first column, so the second column shouldn't be the same, except that maybe for the second year, we add 0 sales, which I don't think is the case. The potential problem with this, whenever you have a calculation and then you see that your numbers are the same, one of the key or the ways to verify probably if there's an issue is to go to your data model. So in your data model, we are picking something from our financial table and another thing from the date table. And these two tables are not connected. So that is one of the potential places where there is a problem. So what we just need to do, I'm sure we've done this in our data modeling class. So I'm just gonna come here. The date column is what I'm gonna use as the key. So I'll pick this date column and I'll drop it on this one. So they are connected now. If I go to my report view, you see immediately that this number changed, and which just implies that, okay, we had lesser sales in 2013 than in 2014. So I come back here to my filters. So now immediately we see that this has adjusted. So initially before now it was returning the same value as this, but now it has adjusted and now it's telling us that, okay, in 2013, our profit is not the same across board. We seem to make more profit in Germany and Mexico than we made in Canada, France, and like that. So that is the second kind of calculation we can do in DAX, which is we can do with our explicit measures, which is future calculations. And remember something key. Whenever you want to apply filters or you want to alter the way the normal functions will return their result, then you will need to use the calculate function. So this calculate function or the filters, you can be doing a previous year calculation, previous month, previous quarter, same period last year, year to date, all of these, you can use them as filters. Another thing is you might want to do some level of categorical filtering. What does that mean? Maybe for some reasons, we want to see only the profit we made in Canada, or we want to see only the sales we made in Canada. We don't want the sales for everything. You may want to do that and your calculate will still come in handy. So just to close on this, when we talk about variances, which is the last kind of measures that you'll be creating with your explicit measures, we talked about anchor, we talked about filters, now on variances. So variances, they are measures of calculations. I'm hoping that we'll have this recording shared with us so we can review some of this again. So variances are measures of comparison. What does it mean? We are looking at comparing two different calculations. So we are picking probably a current period minus the previous period, or a current or a full calculation minus a filtered calculation. When you begin to do some of those level of comparison, you are doing variance calculations. And variances can either be one of two. It's either you have your absolute variance or you have relative variance. Absolute variance, they are just your number variance, which is if you're calculating absolute variance on a time-based calculation, it could be that we are doing a sort of from this year revenue minus last year revenue, or we are doing this quarter revenue minus last quarter revenue, or the likes of that. For relative variance, you want to shift that into some sort of percentages. Now, Sylvia, I saw your hand up. I know I'm meant to have stopped. I guess probably that's an indicator for me. Sylvia?
Hi, Sylvia.
I
Hello,
saw
Mr. Hamid.
Yeah, how
Yeah,
you
yeah,
doing?
I'm just trying to bring your attention to the time, calling attention to time.
Okay, I think probably we take questions now, right? If there are any.
No, you can round up, you can finish up.
Okay, all right. So just as a closing point, let's look at let's close on variances. So what are variances? Like I mentioned, there's measures of comparison. So let's go to this visual that we have here. Let me bring this visual, and so let me just pick this, and I may paste that here. So I have this visual here now. So this is the profit for 2013, and this is the profit for, this is all the period, maximum profit all period. This is for 2013. So let's say that we have, I want to paint a more realistic requirement, which could be on our sales figures. So let's say that first we calculate our sales. So I'm just gonna come here, I'll do our sales amount. And then for sales amount, that's pretty straightforward. We are doing the sum of our sales. And let me drop that here on this visual. So this is the sales amount. This is what we realized from those regions. So let's now say that we want to look at the sales amount for the previous year. So the previous year, because one of the things that you may want to do in business, which is one of the reasons why variances are very much important, is that for you to make sense of your figures and to understand the business status, you need to do time-based comparison. So you need to compare this time to last year. You need to compare this period to last period. That is when you can know whether your business is growing or not. So when you're just looking at some lump sum, just some figures there and not doing comparison over those figures, you most likely will not be able to know whether you're doing well or something is going wrong. So now we have our sales amount here. What we may want to do is now to say that we want to calculate the sales amount for the previous year. So which means sales amount for the previous year implies that we need to apply filters on our sales amount. We need to apply filters on our sales amount. And whenever we want to apply filters, one of the things that should come to mind is we need a calculate function to apply the filter or to shift the calculation. So I'll come here again, right click, new measure. And here, want to say that this is sales amount previous year. So I'll say my calculate. Calculate what? Sum of sales is what we want to calculate. But because we already calculated our sum of sales, which is what resulted into this column, I can reference that column directly. So when you are within your formula bar and you want to reference a measure that you already have, you can use the square bracket to call out all the measures you have, and we can go to the sales amount measure. So I'll select that. That is the same thing we want to calculate, but we just want to apply filters. So I'll come here. We are saying that we want to apply filters. We want to shift the calculation to the previous year. So I'll say previous. Then I can do previous day, previous quarter, but for this case, I want to do previous year. So I'll select that. So for my previous year, it's asking for the date. So what is the date that we have? That is the date on our calendar, on our date table. So I'm gonna say date table date. That is what I need. The year end date, that is pretty much optional. So I'm gonna close my bracket on this, and then I'll close it for calculate as well. Then I'll run this. So once I run this, I bring this here. Then let me just say this. This is blank. Why is this blank? Somebody should tell us why this is blank. So anyways, very quickly, so let's do something here. I'll take out my year. I'll take out this country, and I'll add the year on this. So I'm taking out country, then I'll add, here is my year column from here. So this. Just straight to us, the reason why that was blank was because we asked DAX to do a previous year calculation. So it needs a date within that context to return the result. The column that we had earlier had nothing to do with date, so that calculation would not run. So we needed the date. So now it says for 2013, the sales amount was 26 million. For 2014, it was 92 million. And what is the sales amount previous year doing? At this point that it is 2013, the reason why this is blank is because we do not have a previous year for 2013. So now at this point, it shifted to the previous year, but we don't have, that's why this is blank, sort of zero. And then when it got to 2014, we have asked it to shift to go the previous year. That is what the calculation is saying. So when it is on 2014, it now goes back to 2013, so a year backwards. And so pretty much this is the figure for 2013. That is what is returned here, so which is correct. Where is our variance calculation coming in? So our variance calculation will now say that, for instance, we want to calculate what the variance is between this period and then the previous period. So we can say that for absolute, it will just mean that we are creating a new measure. I'm trying to catch up with 10 minutes, so I have 4 minutes left. So let's say that we are doing an absolute variance on this now. So that would mean that we are doing some sort of the sales amount for the current period. And I'll do something, I'll show something how this would be meaningful to us. So sales amount for the current period, minus the sales amount for the previous period. So when I run enter on this and I bring this onto my visual, this is what I have. But this is not, this variance here would not make so much sense yet. How will it make so much sense? Let me add a slicer on this. I'm not sure we've had some visualization tutorial already, but hopefully if we haven't, this will begin to tie this down much later. So I have the year here, and then I can just quickly change this to a vertical list. So now, if I filter to 2013, if I filter to 2013, the sales amount for 2013 is what is written here. The sales amount for previous year to 2013 is nothing. We don't have that. So that's why this is blank. So the variance for that, since we said the calculation is the actual year, which is this, minus the previous, that gives us the same amount. But when I filter this to 2014 now this is telling us that in 2014, we made 92 million. In 2013, which is the previous year, we made 26 million. And so the difference, which is the variance, is 65 million. What does this tell us? As if we are interpreting this just implies that we made more money in 2014 than in 2013. So there was a growth. But for us to now visualize what is the level of that growth, we need to now do a relative variance. How is that? So I'm going to come here, new measure, and then I can say that. So this is loading up. So I can say relative variance here. Then what we are doing here is now some sort of, probably in some basic economics or mathematics, we are saying that the current period minus the previous period compared to the previous period. So I can say the sales amount minus the sales amount previous year. So I'm going to wrap this in brackets. Remember the PEMDAS or the BODMAS rule. Then I'm dividing this result by the sales amount for the previous year. And I hit enter here. There are quite a number of ways to manage this calculation, but let's just use this one for now. So I'll come here, I'll add this to this visual. And now we have this. So this one that we have here, we actually can turn this into percentage. So I can just quickly format this. You click on the visual itself. Then on the tabs here, we have a contextual tab for measure tools. I can come here to say that this should be formatted as a percentage. And so now we're going to see that when we compare the current year, which is 2014, to what we made in the previous year, our sales went up by 249%. So which probably makes a lot of sense to the business. I think I should stop here. So this is 10 minutes over our hour. Sylvia, over to you, please.
Thank you, Mr. Hamid. Please, it's time for questions. You are meant to drop your question in the chat box, but you can also ask the question. You can drop it in the chat box or you ask the question. Please, time for questions.
Hi, guys. If you have any question, there has to be 5 minutes. And I'm very happy we are hearing that. Like hearing that for the first time. Saying I've been able to at least I really like to be this like that level of you that you can actually what it means and how to get started with it. And I know probably you might seem like, oh, this looks like magic, but you can recap. We are going to upload this video on the channel. You can go there, try to record and try to get the data source and practice it and ask Sylvia, maybe we don't have questions or people need to probably go on to practice this a bit. I know that might be quite a bit of information, but I just wanted to make it somehow comprehensive, so that somehow we are able to touch on the major parts, and then it gives the enough foundation and people can begin to build upon that. So DAX in an hour, it's a bit, but I hope we are able to touch on some of those things. So if perhaps we don't have questions, maybe.
I think I can see a hand up. Aziz.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Thank you for this session. I'm looking forward to see something like this because I'll be using Power BI. Actually, I didn't use that work. I use it personally for some projects. And when I heard the word DAX, it's always like something more very, very complex. Although I'll be doing these new measures, I'll be using something like that. So my question is, apart from what you taught us today, is there still something more complex in DAX than this?
Okay. To answer your question straight, and so not to scare you, I would say yes. So because depending on how much of it you're using and the level of requirement you are getting, that would define how complex this can get. But what I usually would advise is one of what would make your DAX so complex is if you do not pay attention to your data model. So if your data model is well structured and you have the right connections, you have the right filter direction, everything that probably you've been taught, you've implemented that properly, I can say that that would simplify the kinds of DAX you'll be doing to a large extent. But DAX is foundational at this level. There are a lot more things that we'll be writing in DAX that might be more complex than this. So to answer your question straight, are there more complex things in DAX? Yes, they are. This is a beginner-friendly class.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate it.
Okay, I can see another hand up. Kende.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you so much for this section. I really appreciate it. Please, my question is, can you come again about how you were able to calculate the absolute variance? I think I missed it a bit.
Okay, so absolute variance is pretty direct. It's just you taking the difference of between the two periods calculations that you're considering. So in this case, we are looking at the sales amount, which would imply the current period minus the previous year's sales amount. So this is absolute. Why is it absolute? The result is a number. Relative, the result is more of a ratio or a percentage, depending on how you format it. I hope we get that.
Yes, I do now. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, I think there are no more questions. Does anyone have any more questions? You can drop your question in the chat box.
And I have a Gafiz on the call, so you can also assist me if I'm making mistakes. Boss Hafiz Ayosa and Ogatunde.
Okay, I think
Hi.
there are no more questions. Okay.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
we
I
can
can,
hear you.
Hafiz.
I've been speaking all this while, what? I don't know what happened to my
Your
microphone.
voice was yeah, the voice was tiny.
Okay, yeah. So thanks so much, Mohsen, for this session. It was really it's a great one, and I really enjoyed this section as well. You know, we keep learning every day, and no matter how small it is, you keep learning new things every day. So, and I believe that the session was so beginner level section in such a way that if you have not heard anything about that before, at least today you've seen like, okay, this how to get started with it, and these are the small like little things you can come across while trying to perform your analysis in Power BI. And even the same thing Microsoft Excel, in some cases, some company doesn't they try to avoid subscription, they use Microsoft Excel. The same that you use in Power BI is still what you use in Microsoft Excel, data Power Pivot, right? Yeah, Power Pivot. So it's really great, and thanks so much for this. I'm very sure most of us might be seeing it as magic, but it's just normal thing. Just seeing it like as if if you're a programmer before, just see it as if you are creating a variable to store something within your program and make use of it when you need it, or maybe when you are creating a class or a method within your programming. So, or just see it as maybe if you're a mathematician, you see it as maybe when you are keeping something your X value. So saying that S is equal to something that you need that X later. So that's just it. I'm just trying to give it in this layman. So this session will be uploaded to the YouTube channel. You can go there again, try to rewatch and try to get the data source. We ask our facilitator to help us to drop the file, and also if possible this Power BI file, if you can drop it for us so you can look at it, can try to recap and then learn more on your own. So before we meet again next week for visualization. Thank you guys. Thanks so much. I really appreciate you for coming. See you next week. Sylvia, you can wrap it up. Hi, Sylvia. Sorry, I can't hear anything.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I was talking. I didn't know I was muted. So I was saying that I thank you for like the words, and I also want to add that they should also remember that each step is important, and the fact that this session was broken down into steps, like it's a gradual process. We can see when Mr. Mid was working on the DAX, he noticed that he wasn't getting what he was expecting. He went back to the data model to connect the data. So you can see the important step there. If you did not do your data modeling well, you'll be having issues with your DAX. And when we did data modeling last week, we also referred to the previous sessions we have done. So every stage in this learning session is very, very important. Now, next week, we'll be moving on to visualization best practice. Now, we'll be integrating every single thing we've been doing from the first week to create visualization and dashboard for next week. So please do not throw away anything you learn on the process of this session. And also, as you are learning, please be practicing. That's the best way it will get into your veins. If you do not practice, it will leave you the moment you are leaving the learning session. So thank you guys for joining today. And as you can see, we are getting to the end of this training session, as next week is our final week of training before the capstone project. So also, we are not leaving you. Our WhatsApp group is there for you, our Telegram group, and also please subscribe and watch subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you'll be able to you'll be notified when the recording sessions are uploaded in the YouTube session. So see you guys next week. I hope you come next week. Please do come next week. I'll be waiting for you. Oh, let me share the WhatsApp link to you now, please. Okay. I'll share it in the chat like you requested.
So have you shared the link, Sylvia? Okay, okay.
Paul, I hope you've seen the WhatsApp link.
Yeah. It's there now. So Sylvia, are we good?
Sir?
Are we good now?
Yeah, we are good now. I've shared the link with Paul.
Okay.
See you next weekend.